I believe I have screen sharing enabled, and it should be a green set of glasses with a nose. So hopefully everybody can see that. If not, well, I guess we'll figure it out, and I'll just be talking and you won't see slides. But I think you can see them. I'm going to work under the assumption that you can. I'll check the chat every now and then. So thank you all very much for coming out here. And I really appreciate you listening to this talk. And after, I mean, just so many amazing speakers and so many amazing talks at JsPoland, really a shout out to the organizers and everybody that's worked so hard to put this together. You know, organizing a conference is incredibly difficult, and it takes a village. And to do that under the times that we have today, just kudos to everybody who has volunteered their time and effort and energy to making this happen. And I really sincerely hope to see all of you in person next year. We were lucky enough to speak at JSConf EU in Berlin within the last few years, and that was amazing. So I was really looking forward to coming up and seeing everybody in Poland. So today we're talking about navigating imposter syndrome. And after a couple of days of listening to some amazing speakers talking about some really amazing technology in the community, you might be feeling a little bit of this feeling of like, wow, do I really belong here? And if not, you might be managing or working with some people that you'll be able to help along the path. And I think that this is an important topic because we see it a lot in our career. And thank you for the warm introduction. And as they said, my name's Straughan. You can follow me on Twitter here. And I'm the CEO of a tech school. Before that, I've owned and was the CEO of a software development company. And I've spent a career either writing code or managing folks that did. So before we really kick off into navigating imposter syndrome, I'd like to talk a little bit about what is imposter syndrome. And, you know, like the rest of us, I go to Wikipedia when I want to know something. And it says that it's a psychological pattern in which an individual doubts their accomplishments and has a fear of being exposed as a fraud. And this is something that we see in the software development world. Mainly, I think, because we're involved in a industry where nobody can ever know everything. There's always somebody out there that knows more than we do about a particular stack or technology or language or a way to implement something. And it's a never-ending journey that allows us to continue to grow forever, which is kind of the positive. The negative kind of side effect of that is it's easy for us to judge ourselves based on other people and then come up short. And so what I really want to point out here, though, and the emphasis was mine on pattern and a fear of being exposed as a fraud. What we know as software developers, what we know as people that are inside of this community is that patterns are something that we are good at recognizing. It's something that we're good at already navigating. And so I think that while we are prone to fall victim to imposter syndrome in this industry, we are equally well equipped to deal with it. So moving along, who's affected by imposter syndrome? I love this quote. Sheryl Sandberg is one of the most successful executives in tech in the world. And she says, there are still days when I wake up feeling like a fraud, not sure I should be where I am. And see, we see that word here, has a fear of being exposed as a fraud, not feeling if I believe where I should be. This is one of the most successful and accomplished tech executives in the history of technology. Here we have another great quote, I think, from Tom Hanks, famous actor, saying, no matter what we've done, there comes a point when you think, how did I get here? When are they going to discover that I am, in fact, a fraud and come take everything away from me? Have you ever felt that in your journey as a software developer? Have you ever felt that feeling of, wait a minute, what if the rest of the people on this team figure it out that I don't know everything there is to know about JavaScript? Or I've only been writing React for the last few months, and it's something that's new to me. And the fear that kind of comes along with, do I belong here? Am I an imposter? Am I a fraud? Identifying that pattern and understanding it is super important for us to be able to navigate it. And identifying it, we think about, there's that pattern of the fear of being discovered as a fraud. Some other ways that I've seen it manifest is in this need to succeed. I must succeed at everything I'm doing. Or there's this inherent fear of failing, right? I can't do something that fails. It has to be successful all the time. Sometimes there's this requirement to always be number one. And I think of it as the superhuman need. Have to be the first one in the office and the last one to leave. Have to have the most commits. Have to have the most lines committed, each day. Have to be the first one to the stand-up. Because if they find out that I'm not a superhuman, that I'm just normal, then I could be exposed. The inability to accept praise, right? That feeling we get when somebody gives us praise. Wow, you did really good on creating that module or taking care of that bug. And there's that immediate reaction of wanting to downplay whatever praise was there. Phrases like, I was just lucky, or it could have been anybody. I was at the right place in the right time, or, any of these sentiments that go along with this idea oftentimes are linked to this idea of imposter syndrome. These are those patterns of the fear of being exposed. Sometimes that manifests in the way of not feeling deserving of the title or the responsibility or the pay, right? It goes along with the ability to accept praise. Hey, you did really good on this project. We're going to give you a raise. And then there's that feeling of, oh no, they think I'm actually really good at this. Do they know that I have to constantly run to MDN and go look up the docs to figure out what to do next? Because I'm not really sure. Well, the chances are they do. And that's why we have to think about navigating imposter syndrome. And notice that I'm purposefully not talking about overcoming imposter syndrome, because I don't know how to do that. And if somebody could figure it out, please go to my Twitter and DM me. I'd love to know. But for my career and for the people that I work with, I have found that navigating this is the best approach. And so the first step that I think, and maybe the tool that introduced me first to the concept of navigating imposter syndrome, was this concept of gathering evidence. When you have that feeling, or when I have that feeling of being exposed as a fraud, oftentimes, most of the time, I'm not indeed a fraud, right? Ray, it's we don't go through life. If I'm pretending to be, an airline pilot, then I'm definitely being a fraud. I, by the way, am not an airline pilot. But oftentimes when this feeling of being a fraud comes along, I have found that when gathering evidence, I actually come to find out that it's not true. And I learned this from a friend of mine who was in their PhD program and early on decided they wanted to drop out and then later decided to stay. And when I asked them how they came from, through that decision cycle, they said that gathering evidence and determining, should I actually belong here? Am I smart enough? Am I good enough? While I had all these doubts early on that I wasn't, when I gathered the evidence, I had the prerequisites that it took to achieve it. It was just going to be difficult. And so after gathering the evidence, I could believe in myself more and then go and achieve this. And for me, I extrapolated from that this first step in navigating imposter syndrome. And this was probably a dozen or so years ago, maybe more, 15 years ago now. And, that you're not a fraud, that, I might not be the best JavaScript developer that's ever walked the earth. But I do know how to write code, and my code does get committed, and it does go out into a server, and people do use it. And so maybe I am indeed a software developer. Could I be better? Absolutely. And anybody that's worked with me in particular would probably say yes. Jason could definitely be a better developer. But when you gather evidence, you find that we actually do wrong. Don't panic. We're all human, right? That's super important to remember. That there's no supers walking around. If you've seen The Incredibles, the Pixar film, I love to think of that because in that film, there's all these superheroes, these superhumans that are, actually disguised and living like the rest of us, but they all have super abilities that we don't have. And, the reality is we don't have to worry about that because that's not the world we live in. There are no superhumans out there. There are no people that are walking around that know everything there is to know about JavaScript or any language or any profession or any industry that have super abilities that we'll never have. We're all human. And when we start judging ourselves externally against other people, then we find ourselves in a position of not feeling equal. And we are indeed. And so don't panic. We're all the same. We're all human. We all have fears and uncertainties and doubts and worries and ambitions, and it's okay. One of the things that I've found is it's easier to judge myself not against other people for external validation, but rather against previous versions of myself. So thinking like that git commit history. It's better to think about our own project against previous versions of our project versus another project that's out in the wild. So don't panic. We're all human. There are no supers. And this one, I think, is a really important step in overcoming imposter syndrome, and that's the notion of accepting responsibility. And I don't mean here taking responsibility when something bad happens, like raising your hand and saying, I'm the one that broke the coffee mug. I mean, I think you should do that anyway, right? I think that's being a nice person. This isn't about being responsible for your actions, although I think that is important. When we think about imposter syndrome, I think what plays in here is when responsibility is offered to you, the job is to say yes. When a seat at the table is offered to you, the answer is yes. When your opinion is asked for, when you're given the opportunity to be in a leadership position or to have your voice heard on a committee, oftentimes imposter syndrome comes in and they go, oh, no, don't ask me. Don't put me in that position. Don't put me in a place of having authority or having responsibility or having a voice because I'm just. That's often really pushed by imposter syndrome. And I would encourage you to just say yes. Because somebody's asking for your opinion, because they do value you. And you are not a fraud, and you're not an imposter. And being able to have that voice helps you grow and overcome and navigate the imposter syndrome. But take a step or two back if we need to. Gather some evidence. Remember that we're all human. Remember that somebody's asking you for your opinion or asking you to have a voice, asking you to help push something forward, and that your opinions and your thoughts are valuable. In that same regard, this is the one I have the most trouble with, and that's the one that's learned to accept praise. Right? Learn to accept praise. It's already hard sometimes to say yes when we're asked for our opinion or to say yes to have a voice inside of an organization or inside of a team. But being able to accept praise is also hard with imposter syndrome. People come and give you a compliment, tell you how good you did on something, or for me, tell me how good I did on something, or give me a compliment. And my immediate reaction is to downplay it and to say, no, that's not true. It's not really me, or I was just lucky, or you should actually go thank, so-and-so because she did a great job on this, or go thank so-and-so because he did a wonderful job making that happen. And I want to deflect the praise. And I think that that's definitely driven by this feeling of imposter syndrome. And the reality is, go back and again, remember the first ones, gather evidence. Somebody wants to give a gift. They want to say thank you. They want to give you praise, right? So we gather that evidence and they want to give this to us. We want to take responsibility and say, okay, I'm going to try to accept this. And we want to identify those feelings that we have, that we're all human. And just say thank you is the answer when somebody says, you did a really great job on this. I'm the CEO of a school where people come in and they don't know how to write software. When they graduate, we guarantee that they get a job as a software developer or a data scientist, or we give them back all of their money. And sometimes these folks go and get great jobs and they come back a year or two later and they're telling me thank you for how we changed their life and how they got into this industry and how much it means to them. And I find myself when I was early in this position, telling them, don't thank me, go thank your instructor. Don't thank me, thank the people that supported you, or I didn't do anything. I'm just the guy that writes the checks. These other people went and did all of this important stuff. And one day somebody came up to me and they said, Jason, you're telling people they're wrong when they come to give you praise. And I don't think you realize this, but they're trying to give you a gift and you're telling them no. And I've adopted now the thank you. And then there's another additional trick here if you're like me and just have trouble saying thank you. And I've adopted what I call the thank you and it's okay. Thank you. And your instructors did a lot of work to do this. And you did a lot of work to get yourself here. And your family and friends and support that were around you made it possible for you to make this transition. And you've worked really hard since then to accomplish what you have. The thank you and is a good way to look at imposter syndrome and say no today. and navigate our way through it. So the last thing I want to talk about, because we're down to just a few minutes left, is the last part of, I think, overcoming, or rather navigating imposter syndrome, is getting rid of limiting beliefs. So what are limiting beliefs? Limiting beliefs are exactly that. They are things that we believe that limit our ability to grow, that limit our ability to overcome and become better versions of ourselves, to become future versions of ourselves that are better than we are today, that aren't necessarily true. That aren't necessarily true. So how do we overcome these limiting beliefs, which is a little different than navigating, because these we want to push out of the way as part of our imposter syndrome plan. And first we identify a limiting belief and we ask ourselves, is this true or is this something I believe? We investigate the current reality. We imagine an alternate universe. We commit to a small change, and then we test the results. So in the interest of time, I'm going through this one a little bit quicker, but I want to give you a quick example. I don't know how it is in Poland or in a lot of Europe, but I'm going to make an assumption that it's very much the same as it is here in the U.S. And that's that there's or at least a belief I had, that having a degree in computer science or a similar field is a requirement to being a true software developer. And young in my career, 25 years ago, I definitely carried this belief around. I do not have a degree at all from any college in anything, much less computer science. And so oftentimes I kept myself from rising into the right jobs or the right roles that would have been great for me, because I truly believed that nobody would want me. And the imposter syndrome came in that when I was on the team writing code, I felt like a fraud because I didn't have a degree. And what if they found out? And then what if they don't let me work there? And I better not get promoted because then the HR is going to look at it more. And I had to identify that this belief wasn't true. Investigate the current reality, gather evidence. There was a lot of people that didn't have degrees that were writing code. In fact, I began to realize that the majority of people that I worked with in my career didn't have degrees and were writing code. So imagine an alternate universe, one where I don't carry around the belief that I don't have the proper prerequisites to go do something that obviously I can do. I committed to a small change. And what I did in that small change was when I would go into interviews, instead of leading with, I don't have a degree and I know you're looking for one, so if you want to pay me less or if you want to give me a smaller title, I'm okay with it. I switched that self-sabotaging mentality 20 years ago and said, hey, I don't have a degree, and if that's a problem, let's stop now, because if not, let's walk in and continue the interview. And by testing the results, well, in this particular case, my career has moved up into the right significantly over the last couple of decades. And so it worked well for me. So bringing this all together, for me, I think that this matters. Because in my career, when I think back over the last 25 years, the person that held me back the most, the person that told me I wasn't smart enough or fast enough or I couldn't do it or I didn't have the right degrees, was this guy. It wasn't somebody else. It was this person right here. It was myself. And so for me, this has been a huge toolkit to helping me. And then in my job of mentoring and helping others, it's been a great one. So if this hit home for you, I hope that there's some value here. If not, I hope that you're finding some value in a toolkit that you can help others that you know as you help bring them up in their career as a software developer. So to bring it all together, the roadmap is, when we have these feelings that we have that pattern of imposter syndrome, first we can gather some evidence and make sure that we actually do belong. We can remind ourselves it's okay. We're all human. We all go through this kind of growth. We can take responsibility when it's offered to us and not self-select ourselves out of future growth. We can say thank you when people want to give us praise. And we can get rid of these limiting beliefs that aren't necessarily true, that we carry around and believe anyway. So thank you again very much for having me here at JsConf Poland. I am super thankful for being here and being a part of this lineup. If I can help anybody, please reach out to me. My Twitter handle's here. It's JD Straughan. My email address is jason@codeup.com. And I look forward to hopefully seeing all of you next year.